The oven mitts were hanging crooked on the hook again, and I straightened them before I even took off my coat. That was me. That was always me. Walking into a house that wasn't mine, fixing things that nobody asked me to fix, making sure everything looked right before anyone noticed it was wrong. It was the 23rd of December. Christmas Eve, my mother used to call it. The day before the magic. The day everyone was still pretending to be their best selves. My husband's family had a tradition. Every year, the holiday gathering rotated. This year, it was our turn to host. Except our turn meant my turn, because my husband, I'll just call him my husband, because that's all he was by then, a title, a word that had stopped meaning anything warm. My husband had reminded me 3 times in the past week that his mother expected the good china, the real centerpiece, and the green bean casserole made from scratch, not the canned soup version. His mother, I should tell you about her. She was the kind of woman who complimented you in a way that always left a small cut. That dress is so brave on you. You've really made this apartment cozy considering. She had 3 sons. My husband was the middle one. She had decided, sometime around our 2nd year of marriage, that I was not quite what she pictured for him. She never said it directly, she didn't need to. We'd been married 4 years. I was 31. Before the wedding, I had been a project manager at a mid-size architecture firm in Denver. Good salary, clear trajectory, a team of 8 people who reported to me. 6 months after we got married, my husband got a job offer in Scottsdale. A real opportunity, he said. A chance to build something. He asked me to come with him, and I said yes, because I was in love, and I thought that's what love looked like, choosing someone's future over your own plans. I found remote contract work in Arizona. It paid about 40% of what I'd been making. I told myself it was temporary. That was 3 years ago. So there I was, the 23rd of December, in the kitchen. I had repainted myself because we couldn't afford a contractor, surrounded by ingredients for a meal I had planned entirely alone. My mother-in-law had sent a list. An actual list, with bullet points. She wanted herb-roasted prime rib, twice-baked potatoes, homemade dinner rolls, a winter salad with candied walnuts and pears, green bean casserole from scratch, and a Yule log cake for dessert. For 11 people. I had started prepping at 6 that morning. My sister-in-law arrived first, around 4 in the afternoon. She set her purse down on the counter I had just wiped clean and said, "Oh, it smells good in here," and then walked into the living room to sit down. Her husband followed her without making eye contact with me. Then came my brother-in-law and his girlfriend, who was very sweet and immediately asked if she could help. I said yes. She became the only good part of that evening. My mother-in-law arrived at 5:15, 45 minutes before dinner, just as I was pulling the prime rib out to rest. She walked through the front door, looked around the room, and said, "You went with the tablecloth from last year. Interesting choice." I smiled. I said, "It's good to see you." My husband kissed her on the cheek and said, "Doesn't it look great, Mom?" But he was already looking at his phone. That detail matters. I want you to notice that detail. Dinner was set for 6. By 5:58, everyone was seated, and I was still in the kitchen, slicing the prime rib, plating the potatoes, ladling the casserole into the dish my mother-in-law had specifically requested I use. The white ceramic one she'd given us as a wedding gift, the one I'd been careful with for 4 years. Nobody came to help, not even my husband. When I finally sat down, the conversation had already moved past the pleasantries and into family business. Property my in-laws were thinking about selling, a cousin's engagement, plans for New Year's. I picked up my fork. The prime rib was exactly right. I knew it was. I'd checked the internal temperature twice. Then my mother-in-law said, without looking up from her plate, "The rolls are a little dense." I set my fork down. I picked it back up. My husband said nothing. This is the part I've turned over in my mind 100 times since then. Not because it was the worst thing that happened that night. It wasn't, not even close. But because it was the moment I realized something had shifted in me without my noticing. Like a foundation crack that's been there for months, and you keep painting over it. And then one day you press your hand to the wall and feel it give. I had made those rolls from scratch. I had proofed the yeast myself. I had shaped each one by hand. I didn't say any of that. I said, "I'll know for next time," and I smiled, and I refilled my water glass. Dessert was around 8. I had sliced the Eula log and set it on the good cake stand when my husband asked everyone to stay seated for a moment. He said he had something he wanted to share with the family. I genuinely thought that he was going to make a toast. Something about the holidays, about being grateful, about family. He did things like that sometimes, public gestures that felt more like performances than feelings, but I had learned to receive them graciously. He didn't make a toast. He said that he and I had been going through a difficult period, and that after a lot of reflection, he had decided that he thought it was best for both of us if we moved forward separately. He said he'd already spoken to an attorney. He said he hoped the family would be supportive during what was sure to be a hard transition. He said all of this in the same tone he used to announce where we were ordering takeout from. The room went very quiet. I looked at him for a moment. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his hands. I looked at my mother-in-law. She didn't look surprised. I looked at my sister-in-law. She was suddenly very interested in the Yule log. And I understood. This wasn't something that had just occurred to him. This was something that had been discussed, planned, choreographed. He had told them. He had told them before he told me. He had let me cook all day, let me carry every dish from the kitchen to the table, let me smile at his mother's comments about the rolls. And then he had done this. In front of 11 people. At the table I had set. I stood up. I was very calm. I don't know where the calm came from. Maybe it's what happens when the thing you've been half afraid of finally arrives and it turns out you can stand in it without falling. I picked up the serving knife, the good one, the one that had come with the white ceramic casserole dish, and I set it down on the table with a small, deliberate click. I looked at my mother-in-law. I said, very quietly, "I hope you all enjoy the rest of the evening. You clearly know how to take care of each other." I walked to the bedroom. I took my overnight bag from the closet, the one I kept packed for work trips, and I added my laptop, my passport, the folder from the top of my dresser, and the small fireproof box from under the bed. That box. I want to tell you about that box. 6 months earlier, I had started getting things in order, not because I had decided anything, not because I had a plan, but because something in me, the part that had spent 3 years doing contract work in a city I hadn't chosen, the part that straightened the oven mitts before taking off my coat, that part had started quietly taking care of me, even when I wasn't paying attention. I had opened a separate checking account at a different bank. I had moved my personal documents, birth certificate, social security card, professional licenses, into that box. I had contacted an attorney in Denver just to understand my options. Just to know. I had not told my husband any of this. I took my overnight bag. I took the box. I took my good winter coat from the hook by the door, not the one he bought me, the one I'd bought for myself, years ago, when I still bought myself things. I did not say goodbye. There was no one in that hallway who had earned it. I drove to a hotel 12 minutes away. It was a Marriott. I had status there from the work trips. They upgraded me to a room on the 8th floor with a view of the city lights, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I ordered room service, a cheeseburger and a glass of red wine, and I watched the lights for a long time without thinking anything in particular. My phone started ringing around 9:45. My husband first. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, I let that go too. Then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be my sister-in-law. I saw the name when she called back a second time. Then my brother-in-law's cell. Then a number that was, I would later confirm, my mother-in-law's landline. In the span of 45 minutes, I received 11 calls. I did not answer any of them. I want to be careful here about something. When I tell this story, people sometimes assume the calls were remorse, that they'd all suddenly realize what they'd done and were calling to apologize, that my mother-in-law was on her landline at 9:45 to say she was sorry about the rolls. That is not what happened. The voicemails, the 2 I listened to out of 5, were not apologies, they were requests. My husband wanted to know where I'd put the insurance documents, because his mother needed to leave and couldn't find her coat in the closet, and also could I come back and explain what I meant. because I had made things very uncomfortable. His sister left a message asking me to please not make a scene on Christmas. I had already made my scene. I had made it by leaving. I called my attorney the next morning, the one in Denver, the one I'd been quietly consulting for 5 months. I told her it was time. She was not surprised. We had already done most of the groundwork. I had a full accounting of our shared assets. I had documentation of my income contributions and career interruption. Arizona is a community property state, which my attorney had explained to me at our second meeting, which meant that the 3 years I had spent doing contract work in a city I hadn't chosen were not invisible. They were part of the record. My husband was served on December 27th. He called me 14 times that day. I answered on the 15th call 4 days later, because by then the paperwork had been filed and there was nothing he could do that mattered, and because I thought he deserved at least one conversation. He said I had blindsided him. I said, "You announced our divorce at the dinner table in front of your family on Christmas Eve. After I cooked all day, you had told them before you told me." He said it wasn't like that. I said I knew exactly what it was like. I had been there. There was a long silence. He said, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." And I realized that was the whole of it, really. That was the entire architecture of the last 4 years. He had not thought I would leave. He had not thought I would have a separate account, a packed box, an attorney on retainer in another state. He had not thought I was paying attention to myself at all. He was wrong about that. The divorce was finalized the following September. Under Arizona community property law, I received an equitable share of the assets we had accumulated during the marriage, including the equity on the condo we bought together, the one I had repainted myself. My attorney had also documented the career earnings differential, the relocation, the contract work disparity. We settled out of court. It was not a small number. I moved back to Denver in February. My old firm reached out in March, not for the position I'd left. For a senior role, one level up. My portfolio during the contract years was apparently stronger than I'd given it credit for. I started that job on a Tuesday. I wore the coat I'd bought for myself years ago. My mother-in-law sent one email, 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. It was 5 sentences. She said she hoped I was doing well, that the family had been through a lot, and that she thought the green bean casserole had actually been quite good. I read it once. I didn't respond. There's something I want to say to anyone who's been in a kitchen they didn't choose, cooking for people who weren't paying attention, waiting for someone to notice how much you were carrying. The thing about leaving quietly is that it turns out to be the loudest thing you can do. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry at the table. I didn't make a speech. I picked up my coat and my box and my overnight bag and I walked out the door of a house I had made beautiful, and 11 people called me before 10 o'clock that night because they had not understood, until that moment, what the room had felt like with me in it. I understood. I had understood for a while. I just needed to let the rest of them catch up. The oven mitts are straight now, mine, in my own kitchen, in Denver, on a hook I installed myself. I don't straighten them before I take off my coat anymore. I take off my coat first. I hang it on my own hook, and then, if I feel like it, I cook. I keep coming back to the oven mitts. Not the dinner, not the phone calls, not the settlement number, the oven mitts hanging crooked on the hook. And the fact that the first thing I did when I walked into that house was straighten them. Before I took off my coat, before I said hello to anyone, I walked in and I fixed something that wasn't mine, in a house that didn't feel like mine, for people who had already decided what they thought of me. That's what I had been doing for 3 years, and I hadn't let myself see it clearly until I stopped doing it. What I've come to understand is that the way things end is usually just the visible part of something that was already in motion long before. My husband didn't decide to humiliate me at that dinner table on Christmas Eve. That moment was the result of 100 smaller moments. Every time I smiled at a comment about the rolls, every time I refilled my own water glass and said nothing, every time I chose his comfort over my own clarity. I am not saying that what he did was my fault. I am saying that I participated in a dynamic I had the power to change, and I waited too long to use that power. That's the honest version. What changed things wasn't the leaving. It was the 6 months before the leaving. The separate accounts, the folder, the fireproof box, the attorney I called just to understand my options. That was the part nobody saw. That was me, quietly, choosing to take myself seriously before the situation forced me to. There's a difference between reacting and preparing. Reacting is what you do when you've run out of road. Preparing is what you do when you still have time, even if you hope you won't need it. I think about integrity a lot now. Not in an abstract way, in the specific way of asking whether my actions match what I actually believe. I believed I deserved to be treated with basic respect. I believed my career and my time and my judgment had value. But for 3 years, I acted as though I needed permission to believe those things. Integrity isn't just about being honest with other people. It's about being honest with yourself first, about what you're accepting and why, and whether the story you're telling yourself about it is actually true. The intelligence piece, the part that mattered practically, was the preparation, knowing the law, keeping records, understanding what community property meant in Arizona before I needed to care about it. Nobody hands you that information. You have to want it badly enough to go find it. I did eventually. I wish I had done it sooner. But I did it, and it meant that when the moment came, I wasn't starting from zero, I was finishing something I had already begun. And then there's the matter of getting back up. Moving back to Denver in February, alone, with a box of documents and a good winter coat and a job offer I almost talked myself out of. Accepting because I had spent 3 years quietly shrinking. That part wasn't dramatic. There was no music. I just did it, one Tuesday at a time, until the life I had postponed became the life I was actually living. The oven mitts in my kitchen in Denver hang exactly the way I left them. I don't touch them until I'm ready to cook.